Can you, okay, Stanley, Mildred, Grant, DeCurto, Cindy. Hello, everybody. Can you all hear me?
Hello, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Well, welcome to our end of the month monthly meeting. Today, it's going to be a little bit freewheeling, but I've got something I'd like to share with you maybe a little later on. But we're having a discussion right now. John kind of brought a couple of points up, and maybe what we could do is get everybody's perspective on it. John, you want to weigh in here?
Yeah, well, I had brought up that in November, Reverend Barry Downing wrote an article on kind of his Bible and UFOs, ancient aliens, and talking about really that the whole Jewish religion and Jesus was based on alien contact. So I wrote a letter to the editor, rebutting that, but mainly saying that this doesn't belong in MUFON because MUFON was always a scientific investigation, and I referenced Hangar One, where every episode was based on a case, and also UFOs over Earth. The 3 episodes they did was all based on a case investigation. And I said I don't agree with what he says because I see certain people trying to make that ancient alien stuff a alternative religion. And believe me, a lot of people in this field now look to the UFO and the alien as a god, as creators of us. And that's blasphemy and it's wrong. So what MUFON did was they printed my letter, which I was glad. I didn't think they would. And then they gave Barry Downing 4 more pages to state his case. And then the following month, they found a PhD theologian somewhere who agreed with Barry Downing. So she wrote her letter to the editor. And I just shake my head because I think MUFON's become an entertainment company. And when you got a character like Dave McDonald, who's the biggest flim flam man I've seen, and he runs that thing in the sky where they do orgies, that's where MUFON has de-evolved to. So, any opinions on MUFON?
Yeah. Now, to take it a little one step further, uh, let me just point out on the other side of the coin that part of the problem that ufology has, or UAPology, or whatever you want to call it, is that we have very, very little what you would say is hard empirical evidence. Okay. So, what we have to do is because we have so little of that hard empirical evidence that has been validated and verified and everything, even with the ancient aliens, Jaime Jaime
Busan.
Musan has another couple of bodies that they've dug out of one of the Mayan sites, and there's a lot of conversation about it. They're 5'7", and they're sticking flexible cameras down the mouths of these alien or alien apparent aliens, and they're getting mixed results. And part of the problem is, and again, ancient aliens would take something like this, and they kind of take it to the level that they can without having other hard evidence and say, this is something that we're looking at closely. And they're finding that part of what the skeletal remains or the mummified remains have is some type of a modern type of adhesive that you might find in a glue. So this is the type problem that we're having. And when John was brought up the point about MUFON becoming an entertainment as opposed to scientific validation, I think that's a fair statement to make. So why don't we go right on down the line here? I'm going to start with Mindy. Mindy, I'm sure you have a perspective on this.
Hi, everybody. What specifically do you want to know, John?
Well,
Joe.
Your
And
thoughts on
John.
whether or not um, MUFON, specifically in the case that John brought up, is heading off in the wrong direction, giving so much credence to ancient aliens, which is a genre of its own, basically, along with the people that are heavily engaged in it, Giorgio and so on. So I think the question is, what is your take on it? How do you feel about, is it entertainment? Is there what's the level of science you think is going into this? It is entertaining and it is interesting to watch, but to what level? What do you think?
Well, I don't think they ever pretended to be scientists. I think they tried, they're more like people showing evidence for extraterrestrial civilizations, maybe through archaeology and, places that they've traveled to that they've, suspect may not be man-made structures. So I don't think that they themselves see themselves as scientists, although they, consult with scientists. So I think that they're true to who they are. And is it entertainment? For some people, it's entertainment. For me, it's just validating, a lot of things that I believe are true. So I don't think it's one thing for everybody. I think it's whatever you want it to be.
Good points, Mindy. Okay, Nick Curto, what do you think? And you have to
Hi,
unmute.
everybody. Good to be here. Hi, Joe.
Hi, Nick.
Uh, yeah, well, it's a good point. I mean, John does have a good point that these things can be uh, siphoned off in different directions. And to hell with the scientific data, let's go with the entertainment. And that is a very slippery slope. Oh, my goodness. And it's easy to do that. And I have to also parallel what people like Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum and
My favorite guy.
their agenda. And I have to say that they're talking about, well, let's undermine all the nations so they'll be ours, and let's
Yep.
undermine all the world religions and come up with something else. And I'm seeing that there's a way that they can slide this. And I just think that we have to be very, very careful by looking at what's going on, especially in their direction, because they've said, "Hey, this is what we're up to," and they've got billions of power money to do it. So I just want to just identify that aspect there, Joe. That's it.
Okay, thanks, Nick. Excellent point. Stanley Nazemic, you're next on the list here.
Hi, Joe.
Hi,
Um,
Stan.
my opinion is when we first started, we had three news networks. Now we have 100. We have 100 groups giving an opinion. So when it comes to MUFON, it had one direction initially. We saw what the results were, and now everybody else has a computer, everybody else joined, and everybody else has an opinion. My opinion is they do exist, and we're a show. That's it. They've been around a long time. We haven't. Accept it. That's it.
Okay, good point. Good point. All right, Bruce, what about you?
Well, I can't find fault with anything that anyone said to this point, but having a second degree in broadcast engineering and having been asked in a number of shows over the years to validate evidence, people ask me all the time, especially with the paranormal shows I've been on, oh, are these things faked? Are they real? It was not possible for somebody watching, Stanley, you being in the business, you'll understand and agree with this, I'm sure. I taught nonlinear editing. We had the first Avid system ever shipped out of Boston, and I told people then it was not that hard to see, when anti-aliasing or to analyze it. If you really wanted to take the time to analyze it, you could determine whether the stuff was faked. Unfortunately, I think we're at a crossroads here, and not to get off on a tangent, but I think that we are at the point which far exceeds the lack of most people's ability of discernment or critical thinking or analysis of just face value of what they see, to once it gets turned over to AI, and I can tell you some specific real world today examples where it would blow your mind. I don't think anybody's ever going to be able to determine whether what they see or hear is valid or what it's claimed to be, unless you know the provenance and you have a chain of custody that you're aware of, or you know the people that produced it or are disseminating it and their credibility. But let's go back to the other issue here that we were discussing earlier, and that is, as Stanley said, we used to have 3 networks, PBS and some independents. Now there's thousands of people, including us, doing a podcast. So every Tom, Dick, and Harry that can get to a computer with a camera on it is running a podcast. That should be good. I think the proliferation of HD cameras on and every one of these little toys that we live with is great, because it's kind of hard to keep the genie in the bottle. But I don't think you can make any blanket statements about what's valid, who should be trusted and who shouldn't, because man, it just gets more and more bizarre. Plus, as I've told people before, look, if you're watching something on cable television, I don't give a damn if it's History, Discover, Sci-Fi Channel, any of the rest of them, Travel Channel, these programs are not necessarily out there to be honest documentary series. They're out to get part of this micro viewership. It's not broadcasting, it's microcasting. I mean, it used to fight over 2 or 3 percentage points above or below 33%. Oh, well, CBS is 34% in rating, percentages issue. Now you're lucky if you get 1/3 of a 1/10 of a percent. And that's what they work on. So I always tell people, don't forget, these programs are there to sell advertising or clicks or whatever it is, whether it's on the web or whether it's on a cable channel. If they try, as some of them do, to do a real fair and scientifically based documentary, you're ahead of the game. But I can tell you, my son was on the production in New York. This is an example of how obvious this is, because they're not out. It's not a hobby for these networks. They're out to make money. But when Sci-Fi changed their logo from SCIFFI to SYFY, just that simple. They changed that branding around. They had a big gala in New York. My son worked on it, and the president of Sci-Fi said, "Look, you have to understand, we're switching our focus from the nuts and bolts science of some of these investigative shows to the personalities of the people on board, because that sells. It's soap opera 2.0. So we have to remember that even in the best cases, they're trying to make money. They're not out there to lose money. One of the big bonuses, Stanley, you know this for a fact, one of the cheapest program types to produce is a location, Ghost Hunters or something like that. Because first of all, with any of those paranormal shows, they're using old crap cameras running on, they're using old, they're not full spectrum cameras or anything. They're old 10-year-old cameras, because the audio is good, but the video is crap because you're shooting at night in the dark. So they get away with murder. They flat rate the crews. It costs nothing because they're promoting the place where they're investigating. So the cost per episode is way down, even for the network productions. Not necessarily that way with some of the others. I don't want to get too far afield here, but we have to remember that these are, and it's ironic that it's okay for them to make money, and that's what they're in the business. But if somebody charges to give a speech or wants you to pay for their fees to, their airline tickets to get there, everybody's up in arms like you're some kind of mercenary bastard because you want to get reimbursed, for your time and effort. Or you write a book and you're selling it. John, you know this. Everybody's pissed off. Oh, he should be giving it away. Really? What's your hobby? Is your name Rockefeller? I just look at this thing. It's like a Far Side cartoon. There are some legitimate researchers that are doing all right, and God bless them. They put in the time, they put in the effort. If people will accept what they're doing and what they're selling, if you will, then that's good. But it's a very complex issue that goes far beyond just whether it's nuts and bolts or theoretical. And I think that it gets more complex as time goes on. But mark my words, the world is going to change as it is in everything else, but in the media and the investigative journalism area because of AI, because how the hell are you going to know if it's real or whether it
Yeah.
was generated in a computer? You won't know. And I
Yeah.
tell people that all the time. My opinion, I feel free to disagree.
Let me kind of bring it back a little bit. John's original point was about MUFON and the credibility of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to do it. Now, with that being said, I'm going to throw out 2 points that are going to seem like they have nothing to do with the conversation, but these are absolute game changers. Yesterday, an interesting, I don't know if everybody's seen it. Google has made a new quantum chip. Okay. Now, this quantum, just in case you don't know what quantum computing is all about, or the quantum chips, how they work, your computer, the one you're sitting behind right now, uses bits, binary digits. Okay. And that in the simplest form, it's a on or off, 1 or 0, okay, plus or negative, whatever way you want to look at it. It's a binary state. It can only do one binary state at a time. So if it's off, it's off. If it's on, it's on. Now, when all these things work in unison, they're going on and off, and that's how you're doing how the computing is working. Now, the quantum chip, on the other hand, is so different and so much more powerful. It uses what are called qubits, and a qubit is an interesting little chip, if you will, and it has 2 states, but both states can be on simultaneously. Okay, it's not a question of one being on and the other one being off. They're both on simultaneously, and the power of the qubit or the quantum computer, it can do the calculations millions of times faster than the binary digit. Now, what Google did, Google has a beautiful lab. They built this massive chip and just an incredible design, the way these things work. They put it through it. They started doing testing. Now, when you test, they have all the protocols that go into the testing. And what they noticed, they were getting some of the results that they were expecting from the tests. They were predictable. But all of a sudden, they started getting results that they couldn't understand at all. It was data that was coming from someplace, and they had no clue where it was coming from. Now, all these very, very bright scientists got together. They're looking at this, and all of a sudden they said, we think we've just discovered a gateway to another universe. I'm not making this up. And this is absolute interesting. Think about the ramifications. Now, the multiverse has been predicted. Einstein has done his due diligence predicting a lot of this stuff. Now, here is some type of proof that it's not just another universe. It could be trillions of universes. They could be parallel to what we're doing. They could be existing simultaneously. Now, these scientists they're not schlebs. They know pretty much what they're talking about, and they also know what they don't know. And that's the reason some of them are very frightened. This maybe goes back to what John was saying. You know, are we working on something that maybe we shouldn't be? Now, we have the quantum computing. The Chinese are doing it. Google's got theirs. Amazon's got theirs. IBM's got theirs. So whatever's going on, they're going to be seeing similar results as they get up into those computing areas. Now, with that happening, there's other things as well. They've seen scientists within the past year, they finally observed a gravity wave. Now, a gravity wave, again, has been predicted. It's out there. They know they're there someplace, but nobody's ever seen one. Well, within the past year, they finally observed gravity waves. Now, what we're talking about, if you can exceed the speed of light, Einstein said you can't do it. Get to that speed, you're locked in. But now there's indications that there are wormholes, multiverses, not just one, but multiverses. And if that's true, we are at the very beginning of probably something that is going to change life forever, for good or ill. Um, but the science is what I'm kind of stressing here, that there is hard evidence for the things that I've just talked about. Okay, they don't fully understand it yet. And like any theory, you're supposed to defeat the theory. You're not supposed to prove it. If you can't beat it, that means the theory must be good and it becomes a rule or a law. So that's kind of where we're at. Now, point that back to what we're just talking about the efficacy of whether it's the media and what the video media or the written media, MUFON, whatever they're doing, have they been able to reach that level of sophistication in identifying just the simple things that we're talking about with the UAPs and the that whole thing? Again, the evidence may be there. It may have been there for the past 100 years, but it has not been leached into the public domain. So a lot of what we have to do at this point, because we don't have the hard evidence, we have to take a lot of it on faith. And now we're getting into that thing where John was pointing that are we taking and attacking a religious perspective with a pseudoscience perspective, and that's what we have to consider. I'm not taking a side one way or the other on this, but I'm just saying that there's more that we don't know. Keeping an open mind is absolutely critical, and looking for hard evidence is in all of our best interests too. Okay, demanding it, whether it's from the government or whatever. Okay, so I'm not going to, I hit the points that I was hoping to make. John, you want to do a final weigh in on this? And
what I see all of this leading up to, in my opinion, and I put it in a couple of my books, is some sort of a false flag. And I think that's what's behind this whole government, disclosure for the past since 2017. When you look at AI, they can convince us of anything. They might not convince our generation, but these new kids coming up with the AI, they're going to believe every single thing they see is real. And I think the end game, the final, what they're trying to do is to do a false flag. And I believe that false flag is going to involve the UFO and some story that they tell us. And I think it'll be religious based too. There is no God or there is a God. And I think that's what's behind this. I really do, because what do all of really the far left people, the progressives, the atheists say if the alien shows up and says, oh yeah, we were created by God and there is God, what are they going to do? That kind of would solidify it. But if he comes and says, no, we went through that phase, that was before we had technology and the internet, and there is no God. There's only us and now, and do whatever you want as long as you can get away with it, then they can enslave us or whatever they're going to do. I think that's the final end game. I really do.
okay, Nick, you have a final thought on this, or?
Just one thing about opening new windows. I mean, this is an incredibly exciting time to be on this planet. We can all agree to that. Holy cow, this is blowing my mind. And I'm following this stuff since I was a kid. But holy cow, what's going on now, day by day, hour by hour, wham, wham, constantly going on, as you all know for sure. And I just got to bring up CERN, because CERN now is coming across and saying, we've opened up a new window. And entities, or whatever they want to term it, is coming in. What? Whoa. I mean, that alone is just, and here we go with what John is saying. So putting all that together, try to follow that, guys. Okay? That's my comment.
Excellent comment. You brought us into an interesting point too. The antenna behind me, the gentleman that was in charge of that, is head of the Princeton's electrical engineering school. Brilliant guy, a fun guy, a nice guy. But one of his things, every month he goes over to the CERN, and he's been doing it for the past 10 or 15 years, he's part of the sensor team. They have two sensors there, these massive things. And what you just said about that they fired the thing up and is the particle physics that they're working on, they have opened a gateway. Don't know too much about it, but he is just retired from Princeton University. He lives actually in Toronto, but he's taking a full-time position at the CERN now. And again, and this kind of goes hand in hand with that thing about the multiverse and the gateways that are being discovered, that have been discovered. Skinwalker Ranch, is that one of them? Okay. So the science is, there's a closure on this. And of course, like John said, this is going to have an impact on religion. Then that goes back to the late 50s, early 60s, when the Brookings Institution made that silly statement, said, don't let people know if UFOs are actually out there and there are aliens. Can't tell the world about it because we're not ready for it. And at that time, it was probably definitely true. But now, I mean, we've been so desensitized to the fact that, more people believe in UFOs and the alien intelligence than don't, I think. And but again, it's taken us 60, 70 years to get here. Is it going to continue growing? Absolutely, it will. And the question, though, is going to always come back. It's going to be a question of, does religion? I don't see religion and science being mutually exclusive. I never have. And I hope I never do, because I think that, they're both seeking truth. How we get there, sometimes, there could be questions about that. But I think ultimately, if both sides truly want the truth, they won't destroy one another. Obviously, it's much bigger than, the human concepts, I think. So that's just part of the CERN. They're getting ready to increase the size of the CERN too. I think they're going to increase it by almost 30%.
Wow.
And of course, that means they're going to be putting in much, much more power into creating those gateways or whatever it is that they are creating. And nobody knows. So it's all unbroken ground.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, Mindy.
This is Millie.
Oh, Millie, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see your picture up there. Millie, please weigh in on all of this. Okay. I didn't mean to exclude you.
I know. Well, I like the Ancient Alien show, but I don't take it all to heart. And I don't believe everything that they say, but it is entertaining and educational as far as traveling around the world and seeing all the different sites.
Mhm.
And I like Skinwalker Ranch. And as far as Ancient Aliens leading to, they think that aliens created us and not a god, I kind of hesitant about believing that. But, I have an open mind. You don't know.
Okay. Someplace in that whole chain, I think there is definitely a God. Okay.
Right. I do. But, I believe that there's a higher power. What that is, I don't know. But I do believe in a God. And I don't believe, when you watch Ancient Aliens, everything is Ancient Aliens believes yes. Ancient Aliens believes yes. Yes. Everything is yes. There's never any no. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And my
But
other
I
question
think
is, go ahead.
I was just going to say the empirical method and the right way of looking at theories. Again, I mentioned it earlier. The goal is not to prove a theory. Okay, you don't go in there looking for the data that's going to support the theory. The goal of a good scientist is to try to break the theory and prove the theory wrong. Because if you can't prove the theory wrong and everybody tries to prove it wrong, that means the theory must be good, therefore it's true. Okay? Where we've lost track on this, the way that this whole thing, in going back to the 70s, the whole thing about climate change, global warming, global cooling, all of that, it's been theories that have been put forward. But again, everybody's been trying to prove that it was correct. Consequently, in the 70s, they said we're going to run out of fossil fuels by 1990. Well, that didn't happen. Instead, now what we're looking at the reserves are 2 and 3 times what they were back in the 90s. So, we got to be careful that, when we're presenting something as gospel, we had better make sure that we have done our due diligence and done our homework. Otherwise, we're going to end up with a lot of egg on our face. And right now, there are a lot of scientists with a lot of egg on their faces. Okay.
Where did that information come from that you and Nick were talking about the wormholes and
the
multi-universes?
Nick, what do you want to start?
Oh boy, it's been on the internet, a lot of places. I go on the internet every day, of course. I'm sure you guys do too. And there's from different sources, you're hearing this that we've had a major a revelation that we've pierced another level of communication, and something's coming through. And then you're hearing different people saying what they think is coming through. And some of that can be pretty scary stuff, or even we have no idea, but something is coming through this wormhole or this area that is just CERN has done. Also, the question of is who's financing this huge CERN project? Billions of dollars. I don't know how many, but certainly a lot. Bruce, you may have some data on that, but who's in back of CERN's doing that? The whole project. I mean, it blows your mind how much it cost and how big it is. Who's in back of the actual financing? Does anybody know?
Well, Bruce,
Well, a couple of things. I'm going to look into that real quick. From what I understand, it was a consortium of the EU put up a lot of the money, but also there's been a lot of corporate backing of it. I'm not sure I can get you a real empirical answer on that, but they just doubled the size of it. And let's go back to something that I think is relevant to this discussion, and that is if you've been watching, which I have carefully. Secret of the Skinwalker. This goes back to the Utes and their historical description of the Skinwalker coming through a portal. This goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. The Hopis have the same type of history. If you go to in Arizona, if you go up to Metal Block,
Sedona?
Sedona. That's supposedly it got a. But if you look at what is going on, the science, the actual science and I have to tell you that series is more scientific than anyone I think I've seen in a recent time. They go through one experiment after another. They show you the data. They analyze it. They bring in the best in every field. To me, they are, and Joe and I have talked about this, they're getting perilously close to proving that there is a vortex, a portal, a wormhole over that mesa. And this, my question would be, when are they going to shut it down and say, well, it's national security and so forth? I think that program, more than any that I've seen in recent history, not only is more scientific. I mean, they don't focus. I don't think Brandon Fugel really gives a damn about the personalities of the people that he hired to run that. That's my impression. But they are very focused on pushing and pushing and pushing, and whatever it takes, whether it's drilling in under the mesa, doing the LiDAR scans, doing the rockets into that area and having them go off course and so on. My point is this. That's a game changer beyond anything I could ever imagine if they do provide that, because that talks about, that answers questions about time travel, the warping of space, the fungibility of time and space. I want to play something for you if I can, if you'll indulge me real quick, because this goes back to an earlier comment that John was making, and I think all of us have been discussing is what's the impact to religion? How does this intersect, if at any, and how's it being handled? Having worked on literally on the broadcast for 3 Super Bowls, I was stunned to see what was depicted on the Super Bowl or the Olympics. It just, to me, I don't care what your religious values are. I don't know where that stuff's coming from without a very serious, weird agenda. Now, I want to play this for you if I can pull it up. It's something I was looking at again. This goes back to CERN. It goes back to the Swiss. Swiss are an amazing bunch of people. You know, they've got away with like 400 or 500 years, never getting in a tangle with anybody, but they always run the financing behind all the wars for everybody and come out smelling like
not
a
anymore,
rose.
though.
They definitely have their act together that way. So I want to see if I could share this with you real quick, because you tell me what I should make out of this, because I have no idea. I want to see if I can pull this up for you real quick. All right, let's see. All right. Please forgive the vernacular, but what the hell is this all about?
Oh, this is the kickoff of the CERN.
Yeah. Well, it gets worse than this. I don't know what this is supposed to prove, but what's with all these, you know, the demonic symbols?
It was pagan. The kickoff was all pagan.
Exactly. Look at this stuff. What the hell does that have to do with a railway tunnel?
So what's in back? Good question. I thought I was shocked when I saw that. I absolutely went, what the heck is going on? And it gets worse.
Oh,
Now,
it gets more bizarre.
Is that recent or the opening
No.
of the Guthard Tunnel years ago?
No, that's not recent, John. But my point is, I don't understand this stuff. I have no
No,
idea what
this
this
is
is
CERN.
symbolizing, but it doesn't sit real well with my upbringing. I don't know.
No, nor mine. This was really shocking. It was, what the heck is the message here? And who is in back? Look at this. Who's in back of this crap?
Well, the parade inside the tunnel is even more bizarre. I don't have that on this one, but geez, they had every weird. And nobody came forth to say, well, this is what it's depicting. This is why we're showing. It's like Klaus Schwab on drugs. I don't get it.
Yeah.
You know, they were making a statement. This was a very, very political statement.
And what was that statement, Joe?
What we're doing here, it's not to honor God as most people think of him. They're honoring a pagan situation. What they're doing, they're invoking the pagan gods, and
That's some
there was
twisted stuff,
Satan worship too. I mean, they pulled out all stops on that. I was shocked the first time I saw it. Why are they doing this? Yeah.
You know, Fred and I, we had a woman from Europe on our UFOs over Pittsburgh. We used to do a monthly show on TV in Pittsburgh on free cable TV. And she talked all about secret societies and secret services in Europe. And the dark side in Europe is incredibly deep. I think there are so many of the leaders in Europe that are involved in that type of pagan stuff that don't believe in the Christian God anymore. The churches, when you look at statistics, it's outside of Italy and maybe Spain, but the rest of Western Europe, only 4% of Europeans go to church. 4%.
It's been dropping worldwide for the last 50 years. You're absolutely right.
We're dropping too. Even like Brazil used to be up there in the 90s. They're down to like 60%. But that stuff in Europe, and I had seen that years ago at the opening of the Guthard Tunnel. I think that's probably what that was.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and it's disgraceful. But look at all of the entertainers, how almost every one of these young girls, if they want fame, Katy Perry, Rihanna, there's a whole group of them. Every one of them has to go to the dark side. And I understand that the the blonde girl. I don't follow her at all with the Kansas City Chiefs, but she's doing it too with
Taylor
some,
Swift.
yeah, Taylor Swift. She's doing it too with some
Well,
snake
she just lost
symbols.
150,000 of followers on Instagram
Good.
Can
John,
I?
if you
because
don't do it,
because
you're
she got
not in
booed at
show
the Super
business. You
Bowl.
can't be in show business anymore
Right.
unless
Yeah.
you accept that. That's
Yeah,
part
I
of the
agree.
deal.
And
I
that, yeah,
agree.
this whole undercurrent. I'll throw, if I can, and Joe, you can stop this in its tracks. But I have to tell you something. And you and I talked about this, and I've been sending you clips on this. I think I'm not going far afield. And unfortunately, it's not about UFOs per se, but it's about conditioning. And I've started to write a book on conditioning. But here's my assessment of something that I would love to hear your feedback. In all honesty, and you can tell me I'm nuttier than a Texas fruitcake, but that's okay. I think that the end game of all this, beyond the distraction, beyond the bread and circuses that network sports are around the world, beyond the dumbing down of the U.S. educational system to the point where we just dropped to number 40, despite having the highest per capita cost to educate students. We've gone since say what you will, politically on and off. It's a fact that since John Kennedy set up the Department of Education, just as a benchmark, I'm not drawing any editorial opinion here, maybe it should be or not, to now we went from number one in the world in educational output as far as our tested output of graduates of high school to number 40 in that period of time. We're getting our ass wiped educationally. And one of the things that's missing, I taught K through 12 as a substitute for 10 years in gold medal schools in Hunterdon County. And I taught at William Patterson, which at one time was one of the better schools in Jersey. I'm telling you, that we teach nothing of value of citizenship, how to be a productive citizen, a happy citizen, responsibilities and rights and so forth. I believe the end game, and I'm going to throw a wrench out here, and forgive me, you can shut me up, Joe, cut me off if you want. The end game is going to be a holy war with Islam. And I think this is demonstrated by the marches, the hundreds of thousands of people in every European city, from Norway to Sweden to Amsterdam to Belgium to Spain to Italy, and Naples to all through the Mideast. These folks are not interested in assimilating. They're interested in you join or die. It's an interesting religious concept. Either join us or we're going to kill you. The caliphate, a guy that lived 600 years after Jesus, you could go on and on about, Muhammad and where he came from and so on. That's not the topic here. But my point is this. We have so many things going against us right now, and we are so distracted by nonsense. Go ask somebody anything to do with what actually is the history of Ukraine, whether you agree or disagree with the war or anything else. They don't even, until the war started, they didn't even know what the hell it was, much less where it was. They don't know the Straits of Hormuz. They don't understand. Not that you have to be an expert on all that, but we are so insulated, insular in our thought patterns, and so stupid as far as what's going on in the rest of the world. And I think that I can empirically say that because I've been all over the world doing documentaries, and we're as dumb as a bag of hammers about the rest of the world, even at the best. And really, how many people have a lot of time to follow that? My point is, there are millions of very militant, military age men who are Muslim in this country who are very, very antagonistic. And I think that when all is said and done, these folks are not, look, there are thousands of them in the streets of Birmingham and Leeds and Manchester and London beating themselves on the chest like they're on drugs. It's unbelievable. And you see it every day. This is not made up. This is actual footage. I watch Sky News every day. I watch RT. I would like your feedback on that, because I think this is going to come to a head, and we're not going to have to worry about Russia or China, because these folks are looking to take over the world with the caliphate. And they say that, and there's no interest in assimilating or negotiating or living side by side or two-state anything. They're crazy as loons, and they will go to see Allah to prove their point, just like the Japanese would, because they thought Hirohito was God. Your thoughts on that? I'm sorry, it's way off topic, but it
Oh,
bothers me. I think it's so
Okay,
obvious.
John, you have your hand up.
yeah, well, you see the Knights Templar flag behind me, and I got knighted a year and a half ago in Northern Ireland. And they do a podcast every day. I jump on 2 or 3, 4 a week and listen. And that is exactly what they are saying. And they don't know how to turn it around at this point. Because if you look at fighting age men, even though the Muslims are 15% of the population, the population of England is old. They are our age. You know, when you look at the fighting age men, it's almost equal of white British men versus Muslim men. So who's going to fight this battle? They've almost conceded that this is coming and we're going to lose. France, Germany, Sweden, and England will be lost to the Muslims. And they're going to kill the white people. I'm telling you right now, they're going to enslave them or they're going to kill them. That's what they're going to do. And then they will have the nuclear weapons that are in France and England. And this all comes from the progressive movement. You saw them trying to do it here, but we're more rebels and militant, and they almost got us. We were at almost on the downside of the bell curve, where they almost got us, and Trump stopped them, like it or not, and he's causing a wave now of changing everything back and for the better. I think he's going to do that in Europe too. But I don't know how you change that population number. So many, and the Templars talk about this. So many Europeans were killed between World War I, the Spanish flu, the Europeans that came to America, World War II. Who's left? They couldn't repopulate. And this is exactly the problem that Russia and Russia and Ukraine are going to have in 15 years. They already had a problem repopulating, right? So now you have 1 million casualties in Ukraine, 300,000 20-year-old Russian men dead in fighting. Who's going to repopulate their country? And nobody looks at that. Nobody looks at what war does to a country. Europe cannot repopulate based on the last 100 years. They can't.
May I share three?
Let me
share three quick points, Joe.
Well,
Well, I just because they might want to speak this. Number one is, and I can't remember the gentleman's name, but I just lost one of them. Forgive me, but the question remains that, and I forget the spokesperson for one of these Muslim organizations, and he made it very clear: the downfall, the destruction of the white European race, the dissolution of it, is a goal that's stated now by some of these more militant organizations, whether they speak for everybody or not. I listened to an interview with this fella, and he made no bones about it. So let me shut up and let some other people speak. But there was a couple other things I want to say, but they can wait.
Okay, Mindy, I'm going to go right on down my list here. Mindy, what do you think?
Okay, again, specifically, what is your question? What do I think about?
Okay, we're a little bit afield here on, I guess, the original topic. Basically, what John mentioned, starting basically this thread, was that what's happening in Europe right now. We're seeing a major change, a demographic change. It's been taking place probably for the past 10 years. Now, what's happening is all these colonial powers, France was a colonial power, they had Algeria, they had Madagascar, and what they're doing, their population has been decreasing, just like ours has, okay, for whatever reasons. People die in wars, but sometimes it's self-inflicted, like the zero population growth that took place in China and also in the United States back in the 70s has caused, everything it's a two-edged sword. It cuts two ways. Number one, you slow down your population growth, so you're not worrying about all of a sudden being inundated with people that need food and not enough food. Remember, the Malthusian theory was population grows exponentially, food supplies grow arithmetically. Okay, now that's been a little bit not disproven, but it's not as strong as it was back in the 60s. But a lot of decisions that have been made over the years, votes in this country, we see it. I mean, you can take it, and this is not a political statement now. I'm trying to stay away from the politics of it. But you had things like Roe v. Wade back in the 70s. Okay, it's all part of this thing of stabilization of our population. Europe did the same thing, but their problems were the Germans had their colonies, the French had their colonies, the British had their colonies, the Dutch had their colonies, and they were still had ties to their colonies. A lot of the colonies were in Africa, or they were in India, or they were in the Middle East or the Far East. So what you ended up with, they ended up with deciding to give some form of political relationship beyond the fact that one was a colonizer and the other was a colony. They allowed people to come into the country. Okay, so what happened, the EU, after World War II, 1946, you had this movement towards unifying the United Nations, actually the entire world, and making it the United Nations of the world. United World Federalist International. I can name all types of groups that were subscribed to this. Well, anyway, it was cutting both ways. So they had a massive influx of people. And as Bruce said, many of these people were of Muslim faith. Okay. I don't think that's the only problem. I think that was only a manifestation of a bigger problem. And because all these people are coming in, culturally, they're entirely different than the European people. And you also had other things in this country over the past several years, the whole thing about anti-white, everything being anti-white. Okay, again, I don't want to make this a political thing, but it's just a faddish move that was taking place. And again, that's impacting the numbers, and the numbers are what we're looking at. If the numbers are going against a certain thing, you're going to have change. You know, that's a natural order. So I think that's what John is really pushing, that these things are all changing. Sweden's not going to be Sweden in a while. Great Britain is having the same problems that everybody else is having. It's just they haven't figured out how to deal with it. They've been dealing with it. The EU has been making it mandatory for EU countries to accept populations moving in. Okay, unbridled. They don't have to be vetted. They're given the citizenship because of their colonial relationships with the countries. France is in turmoil right now. Germany is in turmoil. They're all in turmoil. And again, it's basically self-inflicted. You can mean well and do ill. And I think there's been a lot of that. I don't think there's been a lot of thought put into a lot of the moves that have been made, whether it's political, religious, or economic. So that's kind of where we're at. Okay, take it, Mindy.
Well, yeah, well, all I can say, I'm certainly no expert on the subject, but I mean, I do see a dying white population happening. I see a growing Spanish population. I see a growing population, people from India. I mean, that's what I'm seeing just, in my own communities. I see a definite, it's definitely a dying white culture happening here. And I think the Christian churches are experiencing, very low attendance, and maybe the other cultures are seeing more increase in their mosques and in their Hindu religions. And you look at the Baptist temple over here. I see that thing it's $1 billion religious structure that's supporting a a growing population of Hindus. So
Yeah.
what's happening here? It's becoming a very global country.
But I think the thing is, I think what we have to do is take responsibility for it. I don't think that we can assign the blame all in one area or another. I think there's so much blame to go around. Again, we've made some bad decisions based upon wanting to do the right thing. Okay. And that, errors of omission, errors of commission, whatever way you want to name it, there's a lot of things that went into the problems that we're having today. Now, how do we back out of it? How do we get back to a point of sanity where everybody comes out okay? Okay, the goal is a game, a zero-sum game. Nobody really wins. Okay, and so what you have to do, you have to come up with a solution that's, number one, equitable, not in the political sense that's used today. Okay, all that stuff, that's all sugary words that mean nothing. But what you have to come up with is something that's common sense and a common sense way of creating true equity. Okay, so anyway, next, okay, Mildred,
Millie,
how about you?
I agree with what you were saying earlier, and I watch a lot of Fox News, and I like what Trump is doing, trying to clear out the the country, draining the swamp. And I don't remember where it was that I heard. It might have been on Fox News because I watch a lot of that. They were talking about just what you were talking about earlier, about they're in the streets and they're very young, and who's going to fight them because people are, older people, 50, 60, 70 years old. Who's going to fight these young Islams? And it's scary. It really is scary to think of what this world is coming to. And right now, the way I feel, thank God that Trump came along and is doing what he's doing. I just hope that he stays safe and can finish his job and pass it on to Vance and hopefully make. I don't think you can make peace with these Muslims, and I don't know how they're going to clean up the Gaza Strip when all these militants are over there, and they're probably going to try to kill them when they come in and try to clean it up. It's really scary. I'm sorry I don't speak as eloquently as all of you,
No,
and
no,
but
you're doing fine, Millie.
but yeah, that's the way I feel. It's really scary, but I'm glad Trump is doing what he's doing, cleaning up America and then helping to clean up the rest of the world.
Okay, thank you, Millie. Stanley, okay, you're stepping to the meat grinder here.
Oh, I'd love to. Thank you very much. Appreciate this. I'm going to go two topics, the one we were talking about and the one we were talking about before.
Okay.
First of all, we basically have right now what's called the Crusades. Reinvented. We're updating the Crusades. So take it from there. Okay. Remember the Crusades? We're updating it. That's all we're doing. So get over it. Number two, my favorite topic called UFOs. Okay. As Bruce has flight time, I have a little flight time, not as much as him, obviously. As a gentleman took off from Fort Lauderdale on the way to the Bahamas. As he arrived in the Bahamas, we have a little weather problem and also a little problem with all the dials that sit in front of you. At that point there, he noticed, before he panicked, a hole. Now he's off the Bahamas, takes his plane, goes into the hole. Less than a minute later, he's sitting off Miami Beach.
Yeah, I heard that story.
Yeah.
Now I watched it. It was very interesting. And that's
Very.
so what did he find? He found a wormhole. Okay, let's take part number two. Another documentary off the coast of Brazil. Little community, loads of people, roughly about 300 UFOs going in the water, coming out of the water. Plenty of footage on it. People sitting on a beach, watching them. Big ones, little ones, three at a time go in, no splash, come back out again. Of course, our government finally ended up down there with two of our agencies with three titles, three initials each. I heard they had a little discussion of exactly who's taking the footage back, but obviously we could turn back to the States. So obviously, we're talking about a lot of different things here, but I think there's somebody actually running the show. That's it.
Yep. Good points, Dan. Good point. Okay, Bruce, you had something.
Yes,
Go ahead.
that story about how long ago was that?
I'm sorry, I don't have a date offhand. I have quite a bit of information, but if
I
you
mean,
go,
a year ago, 2 years ago.
you have to go on the streaming services and you'll find it.
Okay.
My favorite one, which the guy who delivers all those packages to my front door that I can't afford, that one there.
Mr. Amazon. Go ahead, Bruce.
I'm just going to play this is the story of, if I can find it here, off of YouTube. You can look it up. It was in the 70s, I believe, where the single engine aircraft, he had that time slip. He was flying out to Bimini, I believe it was, and it's pretty well documented. Anyway, two points I want to share with you. One of which, a number of years ago, and I don't have the information right on my hand, but I interviewed a guy who had gone. He was a statistician. I have a lot of respect for those people, even though statistics can be altered, of course. But he wrote a book based on the statistical data provided by countries of the impact of mass immigration, all different countries, and how it impacted their social strata, their economies, their governments, and so on. If you go back and look up Gaddafi's speech in front of the UN a number of years before they popped his head off, he said, "Look, you may not like me, but I am the plug that's keeping the southern Mediterranean from disappearing and southern Europe from being engulfed by mass invasion." And his point was Libya was really holding back the throngs that were going to flood in from Africa and end up on the shores of Greece and Italy and so forth. And in fact, after he disappeared from the scene, that's exactly what's been happening. Good, bad, or indifferent, he was right. I have another observation, and feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. Why is it that there's virtually no immigration into Japan? There is no argument about diversity in China or diversity in Japan. They are monolithic cultures and nobody messes with them. It's just an observation. But my point is, if the same system, the same values, the same criticisms were leveled at those two countries, just as an example, there's not, you just don't find a lot of people from South America in South Korea. It doesn't happen. I don't know if that's good or bad or indifferent, but the Western European cultures are being, let's say, modified without reservation. And I'll tell you a specific example. The first time I was in New Zealand, we were having dinner with the mayor of Queenstown down in the Southern Island, down near what they call the Southern Alps, the Fiordland. And one of the things that we talked about during that dinner was, I was thinking about retiring down there, or at least setting up a business down there. It's the most beautiful place I think I've ever been. But so I said to him, you've got very strict immigration policies. And his statement was, you Yanks, because you were founded by the way you were founded and your good nature, you've opened your doors and let everybody that wants to come in, come in. And that's fine. That's your decision. This was many years ago, before we had the real obvious onslaught at the southern border. He said, this is our country. The Maoris have a claim to it. We are going to be very strict on who we let come in here. Unlike you folks, we don't let people come in 3 days before they retire and plop down and live off the government for the rest of their lives. That's our mindset, and we have a sovereignty and the right to make those decisions. It was just an interesting observation from many, many years ago of a different approach to how you handle immigration. We're all immigrants in this country, but once again, that's not the topic of tonight's discussion, but, make it reasonable, do it by the book, and then everybody has a right to come in here, in my opinion. But sneaking across the border is not the way to do it. And especially if you're you're a 35-year-old man who's not here because he's escaping the hardship in Venezuela or Guatemala. I mean, clearly we got some serious problems here, and I think that they're going to raise their ugly head at some point. Just a couple observations.
The point's well taken that the cultures that are not playing the same rules that everybody else is. China has never said we want to become a multicultural, multi-ethnic country. It would not be in their best interest. It definitely wouldn't, and therefore they would not do it. However, on the other side of the coin, though, they have no problem of seeding other countries with their people. Okay, they had a Belt and Road program that was actually very successful up until recently. Belt and Road was they will lend money to various countries, a lot of countries in Africa, small countries, poor countries, and they would start projects or they'd sell them the idea of these massive projects. And they said, okay, we'll give you the money, we'll lend you the money, but you have to use our people. We come in, we'll build the project, we'll run the project or whatever. And they were doing very well with that. They did build several cities that could hold 50,000 people, and those cities are not populated. They built in their own country, and that was an economic failure on the Chinese part. But they also built another city just like that in Africa, I think maybe in Kenya.
In Brazil,
not populated.
South America, they did too. That city in Brazil, it was never
Yeah.
populated. You're right.
But the thing is, they're using that as a lever. Now, there are groups, good groups, well-meaning people and everything that have been pushing this because they want to create a peaceful way of doing business with the Chinese. It's a laudable desire. You don't want war with them. Okay, economic, you can have competition as long as it's fair. That's something that President Trump has been pumping on. But the thing is, they didn't follow that. But now what they did, they overreached. Now China is in a very tough economic situation themselves, but that doesn't stop them from pushing people. We're getting a lot of Chinese people that were coming across the southern border, but also the northern border. And these are military age as well. The Chinese also had I think it was a brigade that they sent up to Vancouver Island,
Yeah.
living on a park in Vancouver Island. They also have troops down, and I think, well, I don't know about Panama, but they have some type of an infrastructure in place down in Mexico. They had control of two ends of the canal. Okay, so I mean, we're not only in competition, but it's a very dangerous point to be because we've made bad decisions along the way. Now, you could say we deserve what we get because we were silly about what we did, but it doesn't alter the fact that it's happening, and it has happened, and it may continue to happen until there's a breaking point. And there, generally speaking, when you're out of kilter, when things are spinning oddly, eventually it stops. Okay. Now, with that being said, can we all get back onto the same page and deal fairly with one another? Yeah, I think we can. I think it's incumbent upon us that we have to. It's not just a question of wanting to, but we have to. And that means they have to too, because they're not in all that perfect condition themselves. Russia can't, they've spent an incredible amount of resources, including human, on this fiasco in Ukraine. Ukraine kind of invited some of it in because of all the corruption that they had and the way that a vote was negated in Ukraine before the Russians did their thing. The thought about NATO absorbing Ukraine, that's like poking your finger in somebody's eye. And it's been that way for over 100 years. That is not anything new in that area. You just have to look at the history of it. So anyway, I'm not sure why I'm ranting here because somehow we ended up going in this direction. So I'm on a James Joyce stream of consciousness. Anyway, all right. Can we get back on track here with UFOs? Unless somebody else wants to weigh in.
Back to UFOs.
Hold your peace.
I would like to recommend a source that I've been talking to the gentleman. There's a source on YouTube that I think pretty much is about it's balanced and condensed and interesting and on all kinds of topics. Go to the Y Files,
With
WIFILES.
the
Has
fish,
anybody
the
ever
guy with
heard of
the
this
fish,
part? Yeah. Well,
the
the
guy with
fish
the
thing is just
goldfish. Yeah,
comic relief, but I think he does an excellent
that's
job.
that's a great show.
Yeah,
Great show.
and he's doing real well, and I would recommend that to anybody. And you just go through the topics and find the UFO topics and so forth, because he is very even-handed. He calls it out when he says, "Nah, look, I don't think this one holds up to muster," and he's not afraid to do that. And I have concurred with his. I listened to a lot of them, and I've given him a couple ideas for some stories, and he solicits that. And a lot of the stories come from listeners, so I would recommend that in your research.
Okay. Anybody else want to suggest something that, following this topic or any topic? Stan, is there a direction you'd like to run off in?
Sure, a little while back, we had a whole bunch of things flying around. Whatever happened to them?
Oh, okay, good one. The New Jersey drones.
Welcome to the American
Jersey.
news interest. Every
Well, first of
3
all,
days.
I think this is all military. And I think without actually coming out and saying it was all military, both the Biden administration as well as President Trump, they said basically the same thing. Now you could say, what is the genesis and why is this happening? That's kind of easy to do. First of all, we're militarily, because we're not at war, we're way, way behind where Russia and Ukraine are. They've been developing the technology along with AI, and they're using swarm capabilities, and they can do a lot of damage. The Ukrainians have damaged or destroyed several major ships from the Russian Southern Fleet, and these were not, these were the top of the line type ships.
Serious ships, yeah.
Yeah. So I think what you're seeing is that the U.S. military is trying to play catch up on a lot of this. The same thing with the hypersonic missiles. That has been going on for about 2 years now. Everybody's learning from this. North Korea, I don't know what they learned because they got their butts kicked really badly by sending raw troops into a meat grinder. And that's exactly what Ukraine and Russia is. It's a meat grinder. Make no mistakes about it. I think if you ask somebody that has a military and a combat background, 75% of them will be against what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. The people that have never been there are the ones that are saying, let's sell more weapons, let's kill more people. There's a dichotomy here of reality that I think has to be reconciled. So I think those drones, they've been flying and then they stopped. All of a sudden they stopped.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
But they're out there that are doing the things with the ships. All they did was move from here back out to the West Coast. So China Lake and that area is where a lot of naval research and development takes place. A lot of their proof of concepts and as well as getting weapons ready for mass production. A lot of that stuff's taking place out there. And the ships at the same time, because they saw what happened to the Russian fleet, are trying to, they're playing catch up, but they also want to make sure that they can deal with the situation as it exists or as it may exist. So this, not to take it all away from the UFO activity, I think this is much more along the lines of, they say if you prepare for war, you won't have war. And I think that's where they're at. They're preparing for war right now.
Isn't it interesting that the American attention span is about 2 weeks and then it falls off the radar? Bingo. Like Palestine,
Yeah.
Ohio, or what happened to that? Or what happened to, I could go on. Bing, it never happened. Oh, I'm sorry. What happened to COVID? I haven't heard too much about that this week. We're killing all the chickens because we want to, eggs are back to $6 a dozen. But yeah, what happened to 109 food processing plants that burned down or were destroyed in the last 2 years? That's
Or
nothing.
the 8,000 cows in Texas.
100,000 cows outside of Houston, the largest dairy processing in the southern portion of the country. After 2 weeks, man, we're back to worrying about the Super Bowl. That's what matters. No, I mean that's the news, and nobody in mainstream media goes back and does any follow-up stories on any of this stuff. You never hear it like you used to. We used to have to do a 30-day follow-up, a 2-week. Now it's gone. Next, what's our next deal? You know, is it the weather whip? By the way, I didn't hear anybody talking about North Carolina or Florida or the aftermath. I'll show you some pictures. My sister lives in Asheville. It looks like Chernobyl. It looks like Ukraine. Nobody does anything. All the NGOs pulled out, FEMA pulled out. Hey, you're on your own. Have a nice day. The whole place is decimated because we moved on. You know, it's just an observation. But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yep. John, what do you got?
I'm good. I'm listening to you guys talk. I'm fine.
I mean, our ramblings.
No, I'm good.
Okay, Mindy, what do you got?
Well, there's been a lot of plane crashes recently. I find that very disturbing.
And it's an excellent point too. Excellent point. Okay, let's see why.
I wish I knew why the planes are crashing. What, did we fire all the air traffic controllers?
No, they couldn't hire enough. They were short something like 20% because they couldn't. You have to be somewhat qualified to go up into the tower or to the radar shack, and they don't have enough people. That's the reason the guy that was on duty when the helicopter flew into the landing aircraft, he was supposed to be covering both or one, either the aircraft or the helicopter traffic.
The rotor wing.
But he ended up having to cover both simultaneously. Now I didn't.
They released the rotor wing guy. Yeah, so the fixed wing guy was taking over both positions at that night. They let the other guy go. You're right, Jim. Yeah. Can I weigh in on this? Because I'm not an expert on it. But I tell you, I weekly almost have, talk to the guys that are experts that blow me away. And we've talked to, and so many things like anything else you do are a series of small pieces in the Swiss cheese that end up having an accident. And, there are a number of things going on with that Washington thing, both from the press and also guys that these military pilots and stuff that have inside connections, and in the airlines, they were wearing night vision goggles, which have a 40-degree horizon instead of seeing the whole.
And they weren't supposed to be wearing them in that area.
Right. They didn't set their the two altimeters for the pilot and the check ride pilot did not match. Then they were 100 feet off elevation, which is critical down there in that beltway area. The guys in the airliner are focused on. I'm sorry, what?
I said Bruce is a pilot, so.
Well, but that doesn't make me an expert. But these guys are, and we talk about this all the time. And so, and then there's a couple. The Blanco Lario channel does an in-depth analysis of this stuff based on ATS and all that, as does the Flight Debrief. If you ever want to look into these crashes, the crash in Philadelphia, and I work as a volunteer with the Life Flights as an unofficial co-pilot for a lot of these corporate jet flights. That was one of this Mexico company. That was an actual life flight, not cadaver parts. But we fly out of Northeast Philly all the time. It's an excellent airport. The Lear, that Lear is an excellent aircraft. That was 40 years old, but it's got a great track record. It looks like he had just very preliminary. It appears he had an engine explode. When that happened, he had asymmetrical thrust on that port side engine. Just augered it in. I mean, it was horrible. They didn't have a chance to correct for anything. The deal with the Delta Airlines, lady didn't have a lot of hours in the cockpit. But let me go back and give you a little backstory on that. When they laid everybody off during COVID and they sent them all packing, a lot of these people didn't come back. And they scrambled like hell after COVID was lifted. And the FAA was approached by the AOPA and the airlines to reduce the mandatory hours from 1,500 to 1,000, or 750 was lobbied for ATP certification. Let me tell you, that's scary. That's less hours than I have, and you're flying the big bus. I don't care whether it's a commuter or or any of the smaller turboprops or whatever. The irony is these people in the smaller aircraft, the commuter airlines, the feeder airlines, have less experience, fly more legs a day, meaning they're going to do 15 different hops to Cincinnati, to Cleveland, to Detroit, to Toledo during a day in the less equipped airports that don't have a lot of the features, it's like the perfect storm of, well, if they make it through this, we'll give them a right seat job in a big bus. And so you've got a lot of people that are kind of marginal, to be honest with you. She set it down in heavy crosswinds on that right landing gear. It broke it off. It popped the wing off. Thank God nobody was killed in that. But wow, it's just if you look at the analysis, and you don't have to wait 2 years for NTSB, a lot of this is pilot error. They didn't set up for the approach right. They just a number of procedural policies after 70 years of sorting these things out and refining them. If you don't follow the regulations and you don't follow the checklist, or you ignore the checklist, you don't put the flaps down, you come in too hot, you don't have what they call a standardized approach where you come in at a 3-degree slope, you do this deal and you're chasing yourself. That's a setup for disaster. And it's just ironic you had all these happen at the same time. I don't think they're connected. I don't think it's a conspiracy. But like so many things in our society, and forgive me for this grandiose proclamation, I think a lot of things are breaking down in every organization. The whole thing is coming off the rails. I think we're paying the dues for getting away with murder for 50 years throughout my whole lifetime. People aren't held accountable. People don't give a damn. People are exploited by their employers, and employees don't want to work. There's not, like Joe said, there's no smoking gun, single bullet for all this. I think it's just, frankly, a mess. In every organization, you find this out: the lack of competency, of reliability, of initiative, of integrity, of work ethic, I think permeates all of these functions. So forgive me, and I could be 100% wrong. Feel free to disagree.
Okay, now
I totally agree.
Along the same line, just briefly, during COVID, the mandated vaccinations, which never really worked the way they were supposed to, and they caused more problems that they really kind of tried to sweep under the rug. A lot of pilots either refused to get the vaccinations and they were terminated. Now, also a number of the pilots that did get the vaccinations died from heart attacks in the cockpit.
In the cockpit, you're absolutely right.
Now, statistically, that should not have happened, but under the censorship that there was, all the people in the military that were drummed out of the military because they refused to get the shots, now we're going to be paying them all a lot of back pay, rightfully so, because they should never have been drummed out the way they were. So in the airline industry, it's going to take them a while to get back to that point. That's the reason they had to lower the number of hours that pilots had, just in order to be able to get somebody into the cockpit that can take off for paying customers. I saw 4 legs on a trip to and from Las Vegas. They screwed up every one of the legs. As a matter of fact, and one of the doors wouldn't close, and they had to come back an hour into the flight. The door wouldn't close. You know how scary that is? That is very, very dangerous. We come in, we're landing back at Henderson, right? We land, it's a plane is chock full. 33 people got off the plane because we were going to be laid over for about 40 minutes while they checked the door. The problem was United Airlines had merged with Continental. The plane was a United airline, but it was a Continental hub that did not fly that particular plane. So they did not have the mechanics on site. They also could not get full crews because they changed the crew requirements. The hours you could fly a month, they lowered the numbers. They didn't have the crews at the hubs. All 4 legs of that flight were a horror show. None of them took off on time. We had to wait 8 hours in Cleveland because of this mess that was created. It was a created mess. It was not one that should ever have happened. So yes, John.
And who gave us DEI? Right? That's all part of this, where, skin color, that was the more important than best person for the job. I got a 98 on the test, That guy got a 68, but we need his skin color. So he's the boss now. I mean, this is the mental illness that came out of the progressive movement. And I hope that so many of the Democrats and people see how mentally ill the progressive movement was. And the goal was to destroy the country. And that's what they're doing in Europe, because almost every one of those country leaders is a progressive Kamala Harris, who are mentally ill. They are mentally ill, but they were supported by Klaus Schwab and Soros, and the goal was to destroy the country.
When
Along the same line, I think what you're saying is true. I mean, it was definitely manufactured, and Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum had a lot to do with it. They did a good selling job of the concepts, but I think most of the people that ended up wanting to implement them meant well, and that's part of the problem. Well,
no, they didn't.
We
Joe,
did
they
ill,
didn't
but we
mean
meant
well. They didn't mean well. They had an ideology. They had this sick ideology that makes no sense. It makes no sense at all. Best person for the job. If I score a 98 and he scores a 68, he don't get the job. I do.
When the president of and let me tell you, Paul, my partner, Eye in the Sky Television, retired with 21,000 hours in the cockpit, youngest 747 pilot in the history of the country, 31 years old. These guys are the real deal. Dino, who flew Harrier Squadron commander with the Marine Corps over in Iraq, retired. These guys know what they're talking about. I'm a lightweight. But when I watched the press conference where the president after they bought out Continental and it was a disaster. They could tell you the scheduling and everything, like Joe said, went to hell. United is just a basket case. But hey, just keep eating up the small guys, and pretty soon you're the king of the hill. When United's president said, we are now going to focus on DEI requirements in the cockpit rather than competency, the Airline Pilots Association, the union, went right to court and said, are you out of your flipping mind? And that's what got that pulled back quietly, or that would have been implemented big time. I actually watched the clip, and I forget, it was some small airline in some third, I don't know what, down in the Caribbean, that were bragging because they had an all black flight crew and an all black cabin crew. And that's fine. Except like the New Jersey State Police, I know for a fact, 30 years ago said, hey, we're not getting enough minorities in here. But that's because they're not getting the education. By the way, did you hear the PSA that's running where they said Tommy's not going to be a doctor or a nurse or an accountant because at fourth grade he can't read up to fourth grade standards in New Jersey, and by sixth grade he's 2 years behind. So it's another initiative, do something New Jersey or something. So what do? You lower the bar to get everybody to be able to jump over it. This has been going on for decades. And as John said, it's, let's make sure that everything looks like everybody is, I don't know many families that have like 3 different flavors in the car, but every car commercial, has to follow that paradigm or they won't run it. That doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter what, if you're a mixed race family or anything, but you know what? It's not you think that there's never a family that's all black or all white or all European or Asian or whatever. And so, yeah, this hurts the system. It hurts the system. And maybe we're starting to see the effects of that in corporations and in government and in the military. And in areas that really make a difference, like up there driving the bus at 500 miles an hour. Yeah, I'd like to have the most competent person. I don't care if they're a 3-legged Martian. I don't give a damn who they are. But they shouldn't be somebody that got in because they fill a quota. I'm sorry. That's baloney.
I agree. Everything you just said.
Okay. All right. Well, we're getting ready to wind down now. It's now 1 minute till 8:30. Just number one, I want to just make the statement. This was a lot of fun tonight. It's not exactly what I had planned, but it was a lot of fun. And this is the last Sunday of every month we're going to be having this. The next one I'll send out I will send out an agenda along with it, so we may stay on topic a little bit. But it was a lot of fun. I think we covered a lot of different points. Hopefully, we did it in a fair and open-minded manner, and everybody feels that they're taking away something of value. So I feel I am. So that's thank you all for participating. I will be posting this. This will be uploaded to YouTube, and I'll send out the link. That's about it. Any
right.
any other?
Can I ask John a question?
Sure.
Yeah.
My grandfather used to be a 32-degree Mason, and I was wondering if that means anything to me in any way.
Well, I specifically didn't join the Masons because they honor a universal God, because they want like anybody and anybody can be a Mason. You can be Hindu, you can be Buddhist, you can be New Age, you can be anything, and you can be a Mason. That's why I ended up joining the Christian group, because I believe in the Christian God and the Ten Commandments and the beliefs of Christians, which really civilized the world. And Western civilization created almost everything in this world was created by Europeans and Americans. It really was, and Jews, and they were the people with the highest IQs, the most creativity, the engineering ability. It just was, and it still is, but yeah, I joined them because they were Christian. And anybody can join as long as you're Christian. They're not white Christian nationalists. They're just Christians, and they are Christian nationalists, but you got to be a Christian. And they talk about what's going on in Europe with everybody else coming in and taking it over, But, being the 32nd, it just means you paid and studied each level. It's kind of like Scientology, where you go up a level and you pay $150 fee, you
Don't
study
say that,
and
John.
then you move.
I'm
It's a
Scottish,
similar,
right? I'm third generation, and it's not quite as bad as you paint it. But I mean, I understand your
yeah,
point.
not that bad, but they do pay to go up each level. That in Scientology, I remember hearing that you had to do that also and go up each level.
But your point about the Templars is spot on, and you're absolutely right. And I was asked to join, and I'm thinking about it. But I'm third generation, and Mildred, the daughter of, you should look into the lodge that he was in and talk to those people. Were you
Now,
in
is
Ding
that is that
Said he's
33
gone.
levels
He's
or
gone.
32?
Well,
What?
John, that's where it gets a little bizarre because no doubt the boys at 33, and there's a lot of symbolism. One other thing I want to recommend to everybody before we go. Jordan Maxwell, who just died not too long ago, has fascinating lectures on the symbolism, the tie-ins with English admiralty law and the basis for our, but also major religions, its contention, and he makes a pretty strong case for that Rome never, the Roman Empire never died. It became the Vatican, and it's some interesting stuff, the symbolism and the Pope's robes and so forth. But look at Jordan Maxwell, his speeches, and see what you think. I think it's interesting about the banking industry and usury and so forth. But John makes a good point. The Templars, they got run out of Dodge when they, because they were pretty strict on their values and what they did. Go watch The Secret of Oak Island. It's all tied in with the Templars, perhaps, and what went on,
Yeah,
and
that's
where
another show I
this,
love.
where the temple, all the gold from, King from the Temple Mount ended up, and it's fascinating stuff. So yeah, they're an honorable people that are members of the Temple. Knights Templar for sure.
There's one thing about symbolism that really scares me, and I did some research into Enochian and the occult and all of that. And you see all of these symbols they use, and a lot of times they won't tell you what it means, And if you look into some of the famous alien abductions, Carla Turner, Betty Andrees, and others, they encountered these aliens, but they use these symbols and a language they never heard, and you have to repeat. They make the abductee repeat this stuff, but you don't know what you're saying. And this is a demonic type thing, where some of the alien abductions did go that route. So I know that type of symbolism and whatever language they use, that's real, and it's kind of scary because it falls right in with the occult stuff too.
Matter of fact, John has written several excellent books. I suggest you all look them up. They're compelling reading, and he's actually a very good writer.
Thanks.
Gave you the kiss of death, John.
Yeah,
really.
thanks.
I'm going to quote him on that on the website. But check out Jordan Maxwell. He has fascinating lectures. I thought that they were very interesting.
Okay. I got to
So
go
I'm
watch
in
a Travel
Florida.
Channel now.
So I'm
Yeah, I
in Florida.
think-
Which organization should I look into it as far as the my grandfather? What is the name between the Christian one that you're talking about, John, and the other one that you didn't want to join because it wasn't Christian?
Well, any Knights Templar is a Christian group, and the Freemasons are a universal god,
Right.
kind of a New Age god, But if you
You
go
have to believe in a supreme being of some type, but you do not have to be a Christian. And John is completely correct about that. So it's open to all faiths, or you have to believe in that there is a supreme deity. That's what the G stands for. But the God is who you follow, not necessarily Christ. So that's the big
And
difference
of course,
there.
the Masons are the ones that built the first temple.
Yeah, but you got the Knights of Columbus too. You've got but any of those Templar, there's the Hospitaliters also, who were Templars, but they really took care of the injured soldiers. The Templars took care of the financing side of it. But as long as you stick with a Christian organization, if you're Christian, then I would say go that route.
Yeah, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for the information.
All right.
Okay, everybody, with that being said, I think a lot of information was shared tonight. Maybe some of it was even good. But anyway, thank you all for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm sure Bruce and John, hopefully everybody enjoyed being here tonight. So
Thank you for putting it together, Joe, and thank you everyone for.
well, you're
Yeah,
all part
sounds
of
good.
the family. So okay.
Thanks.
All right, and I'll see you all in a couple of weeks, and I'll send out the email. You'll get the email with the link. So
All right.
Thank
okay?
you all.
Thank
Be
you.
safe.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.